This is the toughest, most stressful time I've had in business so far, and I've never spoken about it publicly, so stay tuned. Welcome to the Mastering Real Estate podcast. This podcast is for real estate investors and professionals looking to take their real estate game to the next level. Each week, I review the industry's leading real estate books and break down the main lessons that you can apply to your life and business. Then, every other week, I review my own personal lessons learned from flipping over 100 houses and being a full-time real estate investor since 2018. Stay tuned each week so that we can all become masters of real estate together. Welcome back to episode 16 of the podcast. A lot of people in this industry only talk about their successes and wins, but not me. My lessons have been hard-earned, and I want to share them with you so that hopefully you can avoid some of the mistakes that I made along the way as I learned to become a professional real estate investor. Before we get into it, I'm your host, Maura. I've been a full-time real estate investor since 2018. I've managed over 100 flips, founded and grew a real estate investment firm, and I live and work in the real estate industry every day. We have 2 show formats on this podcast. We used to publish 2 episodes per week, but we've scaled back to 1 per week, and I'll switch off show formats every other week now. The first show format is the Real Estate Book Review Show, where I analyze the industry's leading real estate books, pick out the key points, and help you apply the key concepts to your life and business. Then, every other week, I'll share some of my personal, most important lessons learned from flipping over 100 houses and being a full-time real estate investor for 6+ years. Also, we have an awesome YouTube channel where you can watch the video versions of our podcasts. Just search for the Mastering Real Estate podcast or Duratus Properties, and you'll find us on YouTube. You can also see a before and after video of the project that we talk about in this episode, so make sure you check that out. Also, I would love it if you could subscribe so that you never miss an episode or any of our other content. Today, we're reviewing project number 8. A medium-sized flip that occurred during a time of crisis and transition in the company. Let me set the stage for you. Duratus Properties was starting to gain traction in mid-2019. We had several successful projects under our belt. A local bank was about to give us a line of credit to grow the business, and we were really starting to gain momentum. One thing that I haven't discussed on the podcast yet is that Aziz was not my original business partner in Duratus Properties. Originally, when I founded the company, I partnered with a local contractor to be my business partner. My thought process at the time was that I knew I could run the business operations side of things, but I needed a construction expert to manage all of our construction. I thought that we brought complementary skill sets to the table, and I had worked with this guy on a few projects, and they went well. He was a good guy, and I thought that we would have a good partnership. What I did not fully appreciate or understand at the time is that we were just too different to have a real long-term business partnership. This contractor was a great guy, and I still honestly wish him all the best. When I say that we were too different, I mean that our backgrounds, upbringings, educations, and values were completely different. This guy was born and raised in Alabama, and I grew up in California. I come from a wealthy family, and this guy came from a middle-class family. I was finishing my master's degree at the time, and this guy had a high school degree and a contractor's license. I'm a woman, and he was a man, and the list goes on. Honestly, I didn't think that this stuff mattered that much. In the Marine Corps, I worked with people from all walks of life and generally got along well with most people, so I thought that this would be similar. I was about to learn a rough lesson in what it takes to have a successful business partnership. Before we get deeper into the story, let's review some of the basic property details of this project. We bought the house from a wholesaler in Birmingham. It was located at 548 Cary Drive in Birmingham, Alabama, in an area called Center Point. It was a medium-sized flip. The house was built in 1970. It was 1,600 square feet. It had 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The year was mid-2019. Construction took us approximately 3 months. The total project cost was $90,000. The purchase price was $62,890. The rehab cost our contractors about $18,000, and it cost us about $5,700. And I'll talk about that more in a second. And we ended up selling the house for $135,000, which equated to roughly a $40,000 profit, which we ended up splitting 50-50 with our contractor partners on the project. So the story left off with me explaining some of the differences between me and my original business partner that I didn't think would be a big deal at the time. Looking back, I realized that these differences did matter a lot. When I would speak to my original business partner about the vision for the business, or show him elaborate spreadsheets, or give him my 75-page business plan, I can now see that it was probably almost like I was speaking a different language to him. I thought I was communicating clearly and that we were on the same page. But in reality, we were probably just on 2 totally different wavelengths. Another thing I've come to realize over time is that most contractors, including my original business partner, highly value their freedom and autonomy. They like being able to pick their projects, make their own schedule, and they usually don't love being beholden to people. Just as my company was really starting to pick up momentum, my original business partner decided to leave. He decided this when I told him that he would essentially need to stop doing independent contract work and focus 100% on building Duratus properties with me. Along with that, I offered him a salary, substantial equity, and profit distributions to do this, but ultimately, he decided to walk away. I was totally shocked. I seriously did not see that coming, and at the time, I was devastated. Of course, looking back now, I can see why this happened, but at the time, I was so shocked. I wasn't sure that I could run and scale the business without his construction experience. So, at this point, I learned a very hard and very important lesson about business partnerships. Some of my key takeaways that might help you is that your business partner must have common values with you. You can have a lot of differences. You don't need to have the same background. You don't need to be the same person, but you do need to have common values. If you don't, it will likely become an issue. And another point is that while you don't need to have the same background, really extreme differences will also probably cause issues. Just, how I didn't realize that the way that I communicate, the way I speak, the way that sometimes I love to present things in long written documents or spreadsheets, that just didn't translate to my original business partner. We were just so different that I think we both had really sincere, good intentions, but we were seriously on different wavelengths. And that is not a recipe for success. So you don't need to have the same background, but in the same breath, you don't want to be too different to the point where you're not on the same page and not totally speaking the same language. I would also recommend for a business partner to have complementary skill sets. Obviously, my original partner and I, we did have complementary skill sets. That was one of the big reasons why I thought he would be a good partner. And Aziz, my current partner, we have different complementary skill sets, but still complementary skill sets. So I think that's important in a partnership. You want to be definitely bringing different things to the table so you have more bases covered. And then the last thing I wrote is you want to have aligned goals. I think trying to be really clear about the goals for the company as well as your personal goals and making sure that everything is aligned is really important to setting a good foundation for a strong business partnership. And obviously I screwed this up with my original business partner but I got a do-over, as you'll hear about in later episodes. And at least I learned from my mistakes, and now I've had a long and successful business partnership, and I'll talk more about that in a future episode. Okay, back to the story. So my business partner left, and he was obviously in charge of construction, so I had to find another way to get this project done. Despite some of the issues on our last project at 4770 Elfreth Johnson Drive, which you might have heard about in episode 14 of the podcast, I decided to partner with the same contractor group that worked on that project to help get 548 Cary Drive completed. We structured the deal the same way as we did on the last one. My company would fund the purchase of the property and coordinate the sale, and the contractor group would fund and manage the rehab. Then we would split the profit 50-50. Unsurprisingly, we ran into all the same issues that we faced on the last project with the contractors. They moved slower than we wanted. Their focus was split between several projects. They lacked attention to detail. There were a lot of difficulties with communication. However, in the end, we completed the project and it looked great and it sold easily. So despite this time being a time of extreme stress and feeling like we were in crisis, I was able to find a way to make it happen, and the house actually turned out pretty well. But this combined with my partner leaving the business at a very critical time really drove home the lesson that usually it is not a good idea to partner with contractors. Just in case I hadn't learned that lesson on my last project, now I had really learned it. My advice for anybody in a similar situation would be to just keep the relationship between you and the contractor simple and straightforward. Pay them to do a defined scope of work and leave it at that. Don't try to get creative or fancy because it usually doesn't work. My experience is not unique in this, guys. If you talk to other real estate investors, a lot of them will have stories like mine. There are occasional unicorns out there. I'm not going to say this is 100% true all the time, but it is true most of the time. Keep the relationship with your contractor simple. Have them do a clearly defined scope of work, pay them on time, leave it at that. Like I mentioned before, most contractors highly value their freedom and autonomy, and they don't want to be beholden to someone else. So just let it be. Okay, in summary, my key takeaways from this project are: number one, be very careful who you become business partners with. It is imperative that you have shared goals and values and that your backgrounds are not extremely different. The book Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman has a lot of great advice on creating successful business partnerships, so I would highly recommend reading that before you solidify a business partnership. And lesson number 2 is actually the same as takeaway from episode 14, which is don't partner with contractors. Trust me, don't. Just work with them, have a good working relationship, but don't try to complicate the relationship. Now I want to give a quick thanks to our show sponsor, Duratus Academy. We have a bunch of free investor resources, all of our podcast show notes, and an awesome masterclass on how to get started investing in real estate on our website, duratusacademy.com. One cool free tool that I really recommend checking out is our property analysis spreadsheet tool. This is the actual spreadsheet that my team and I use to analyze deals, and you can download it for free on our website in the resource section. So make sure that you check that out, as well as all of our other tools at DuratusAcademy.com. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. I hope that some of my rough lessons learned will help you on your real estate journey and hopefully save you some pain. Stay tuned next week because it's tax season and we're reviewing Amanda Hahn and Matthew McFarland's The Book on Tax Strategies for the Savvy Real Estate Investor. You don't want to miss this one. See you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. We are a new and growing podcast, so every rating, review, and share helps immensely. Also, make sure that you're following us on YouTube and social media. You'll get a lot more behind the scenes and content there daily. See you in the next one.